Kelsey. This is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I am wearing a fancy hat that lives at my parents' house because that is in fact where I am. In case you aren't aware, I am here this month dealing with a family crisis that was rather unexpected. So that's what's up with me and why there's been a little absence on this channel. But I do have a little bit of time to myself here this evening, which I have not had a lot of since I arrived. And I wanted to film my 5-star reads of 2018 video since that's one of the sort of end of year, beginning of year videos that's really important for me to post. And it's one that should be pretty easy for me to film because all I really need to do is give you like a couple sentences about why this book was one of my 5-star reads of the year. I have some interesting, I guess, sort of statistics with regards to my 5-star reads of 2018. You may know that towards the end of the year, I was sort of freaking out a bit that I just didn't have that many 5-star reads this year. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? So I read, I think, 99 books total in 2018, and only 8 of those were 5-star reads for me. Of those 8, there was surprisingly a really even split between adult, young adult, and middle grade, which is interesting because my reading does not split out evenly like that. I think I tend to read far more adult than either YA or middle grade. So that was a bit of a surprise to me. I only have 3 books on this list that are adult, and they are all from the Tor.com novella line. 2 of them are actually novella length, and one is actually even shorter. It's a novelette. So it is weird to me that there are no adult novels that I gave 5 stars this year, considering how many of them I read. I have 3 YA novels that I gave 5 stars. I am pretty darn picky about which YA books I pick up these days, but the ones I pick up I seem to be really liking. And then I have 2 middle grade books on this list, one of which is a novel and one of which is a graphic novel. So the first book that I gave 5 stars to in 2018 was actually that middle grade graphic novel, and that's The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill, which is just so sweet and charming and wholesome and inclusive. It's about these 2 girls who start to learn the practice of the care of these little tea dragons that are these itty-bitty dragons that bond closely with their caretaker owners and grow tea leaves out of the horns on their heads. It's just so cute. I want a tea dragon. And it's got this very small town community, but definitely fantasy world feel. There's like all this, you know, high fantasy stuff in this world, but this is just such a small idyllic story. There's a lot of this that's sort of about the passing down of knowledge and craft and tradition to younger generations, and it's just charming. The next book is a young adult novel, and that is one that I actually have my copy of here at this house right now, and it is Wild Beauty by McLemore. I have a review of this book, so I will link it both in video and Goodreads form. McLemore writes just these beautiful, magical realism, fantasy, standalone stories. This is a little bit fairy tale-ish in some aspects. It is full of queer characters. It's about a family of cousins, and the younger generation of them are basically all bisexual girls. And they have the magical ability to grow these gorgeous flowers, but with some conditions, and they are tied to the land on which they live and work. It's definitely also a book about Latinx immigrant culture in the United States, and about some of that history and those power structures, and about abuse of workers. And on top of all of that social commentary, there are just really, really lovable characters and really wonderful relationships. And this actually, thinking back on it, might be my top favorite book that I read in 2018 if you asked me to pick just one. It sort of lodged in my ribcage and stuck there. Next is the aforementioned Tor.com publishing novelette, and that is The Only Harmless Great Thing by Brooke Bolander, which is really, really dense and beautifully written and packs a lot of alternate history ideas into a small package and sort of 3 different narrative storylines. But basically the premise is, what if Topsy, the elephant who was electrocuted at Coney Island, had been sold to the company that was poisoning the radium girls to take over that work with poisonous radium paint. In this alternate history, elephants are a little closer to being easily recognizable as a fully sentient species, and it's a very dark, angry story, and again, just beautifully written. I also have a full review of this one that I will link for you. Next is another one of my novellas on this list, and that is Binti the Night Masquerade by Nnedi Okorafor, which is the 3rd and final book in the Binti trilogy. For the finale of a series, there is, I think, less I can sort of say in a best of the year why you should read this video. I think my favorite of this series is still the middle book, which I know is an unpopular opinion that no one else shares with me. But this ending of this story really delivered something that I was looking for at the time I read it, which is sci-fi that isn't afraid to go very, very dark, but is still ultimately very hopeful in its message, and it left me with an uplifted feeling. There's sort of this theme throughout the 3 books where in each book Binti's identity grows and grows and grows, and she accepts more and more things as part of herself, even though they are a struggle for her. She isn't necessarily eager to accept all of these changes to her perception of her own identity, but they all make her bigger and vaster and greater as a person. And I think that this book definitely delivered what it needed to in terms of being a finale for this series and for the themes of this story. Next is the 2nd young adult novel on this list, and probably my runner-up for, like, 2nd favorite book of the year. And that was In Other Lands by Rees Brennan, which just took me so by surprise because I kind of wanted to read it because I'd kind of vaguely heard good things, and I thought it might be a little bit of an unusual YA read, and I was curious. This was just so much more than I expected or hoped it would be. It is a very self-aware, kind of tongue-in-cheek portal fantasy about a boy named Elliot, who is, he's a multifaceted character. He is, you know, wonderfully pacifist and intelligent and nerdy, but he is also just a jerk so much of the time, and you eventually learn why that is, and it will break your heart in pieces. But Elliot learns that he can go to this other magical land, and he joins the school of the training school of the border guard there, which trains up mostly humans to defend the borderlands. And I wouldn't say that the world building in this is particularly substantial. It's all sort of more commentary on genre tropes than anything else. But for me, what this book does was just spot on. It ultimately delivered a lot of very emotional feels very unexpectedly, and I thought it was just great. I should add that this also has LGBTQ representation in it. Elliot is bisexual, a major supporting character is gay, and there are several other side characters who are also queer. Next is the 3rd and final Tor.com book on this list, also a series finale, and that is Exit Strategy by Martha Wells. I just have gotten very deeply invested in this series, The Murderbot Diaries, and in the story arc of the main character, Murderbot, who is a sort of introverted snarky antisocial security unit with a heart of gold. Again, I can't say a whole ton about this because, again, final book in a series, but I will say that this did exactly what I was hoping that this series would do ever since, you know, book 1 ended. Finally, I got that payoff I was waiting for, and I loved it. Next is the third and final YA novel on this list, which is another Anna Marie McLemore book, and that is Blanca y Roja. Again, this has those Latinx magical realism influences. Again, it's a standalone. All 3 of my YA books on this list were standalones. And this one draws far more heavily and directly on several different fairy tales and is specifically making a conversation happen about fairy tale tropes and the characters' relationships with how they see themselves as fitting into fairy tale archetypes. I would say that that's sort of the main thematic thrust of this book, and I really loved that. It's about sisterhood and ideas of femininity and about colorism. It didn't quite have the, like, punch you in the gut wow factor for me that Wild Beauty did, but I loved a lot of what this was doing, and I still love Anna Marie McLemore's writing. So this was absolutely still a 5-star read for me, even though it didn't quite match up to what I'm claiming as my favorite book of the year, which was Wild Beauty. And then my final 5-star read of the year, which is a middle grade novel and yet another series finale, is The Girl Who Raced Fairyland All the Way Home by Catherynne M. Valente. This is a second book where there is a copy of this in this house, though this is not my copy. I've stolen it for filming purposes. This is the 5th and final book in the Fairyland series, which are possibly my favorite books of Valente's, and she's one of my favorite authors. I would say that the Orphan's Tales books are also pretty high up there on my favorites of her books. But every single book in this series was a 5-star read for me. Valente is just one of the most wildly imaginative authors I've read, and these are just so wild and clever and insightful. I was a little worried reading this book that it might not have something that just, you know, blew me away like each of the first 4 books in the series did. It turned out the thing in this book that blew me away was the ending. I should not have feared. I was approaching the end thinking, maybe is the finale of this series only going to be a 4-star read for me? And then that ending was not what I expected at all, and I loved it, and it made me feel all sorts of things. This series is, again, self-aware portal fantasy, but of an entirely different narrative character than something like In Other Lands. And I would dearly love to see these become classics of the genre. Anyhow, that's it. Those were my meager 5-star reads of 2018. But man, thinking about all of these books makes me happy because I loved them all so much. Anyhow, that's all I've got for you this evening. I hope you're having a nice day. Bye for now.